Okay, so here's my audience. And here are my two 4x6 note cards. And here goes my speech. Nothing in life is more coveted than life itself. Therefore, you should be able to decide whether or not you get to live. However, in present-day America, that is not always the case. In fact, in 32 states, humans' fate is allowed to lie at the hands of a jury. Since 1976, 1,330 Americans have lost their lives against their will to the death penalty. This information can be found at the Death Penalty Information Center's website. In addition to the sheer fact that it is moral, the death penalty also carries additional baggage, can be done away with in one Supreme Court decision, all the while effectively deterring crime, saving taxpayer money, and saving innocent lives. First and foremost, the death penalty violates one of life's most basic principles. You cannot right a wrong with another wrong. Simply put, yes, there are criminals out there that commit heinous, unforgivable crimes, but does us simply killing that person make Americans look any better than the criminal? Janine Woodward, former San Quentin warden, said it best. The death penalty serves no one. It does not serve the victims. It does not serve prevention. It is truly about retribution. Now, if morality of the death penalty doesn't persuade you, maybe the fact that the death penalty is provenly ineffective might change your mind. According to a study conducted by the Death Penalty Information Center, 82% of all executions have taken place in the South since 1976. In the South, however, the death rate per million is 60. In contrast, in the Northeast, where only 0.3% of executions have taken place in that same time, the death rate per million is 38. The murder rate per million is only 38. In addition, a study done by the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology found that 88% of the country's top criminologists find the death penalty to be ineffective. On top of this, facts and studies have also shown the death penalty to be arbitrary. First, the death penalty is arbitrary due to the fact that those with income. First, the death penalty is arbitrary based upon income level. Those defendants with lower income levels do not have the opportunity to hire top-notch attorneys, allowing them to get out of stricter penalties as the wealthy do. According to a LA Times article, at one point in California, every one of the 384 death row inmates were poor enough to qualify for a state-appointed lawyer. Another reason the death penalty is found to be arbitrary is the fact that the juror in the death penalty is required to take a poll in which they have to say they are willing to convict a defendant to the death penalty. This in turn stacks the odds against the defendant. This is according to the Kershey law firm. All this added together and more makes me wonder just how the death penalty is still in place. Here in America, we are fortunate because if we as a nation do not agree with the law, we have the power to overturn that law, and the death penalty is no different. On December 15th, 1971, the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, stating excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines induced, nor cruel and unusual punishment be inflicted. One would think the ultimate form of cruel and unusual punishment would be that of one's life. However, 32 states and the Supreme Court don't seem to agree. In an ideal world, all 50 of the states would deem the death penalty illegal. However, the likeliness of that happening is that of fitting a square object in a round hole. Fortunately enough, however, all that needs to happen is for the Supreme Court to deem the death penalty unconstitutional in accordance with the 8th Amendment. Now this is easier said than done, but being that the death penalty is a hot topic, it should again resurface in front of the Supreme Court. Banning the death penalty, however, is just the first step in a long reform process. Obviously, without the death penalty in place, you would need another penalty to sway criminals from their heinous crimes. Unfortunately, we have that law in place, life without parole. Life without parole is currently being used in 49 out of 50 states. And hey, what can be worse than spending the rest of your life in a prison cell without any hope of ever getting out? According to a study by the UC Berkeley, the majority of death row inmates actually prefer to be executed over than serve a life without parole sentence. Another benefit of the life without parole program is that without parole inmates we can force life without parole inmates to work and pay restitution into victim compensation funds. In conclusion, life without parole effectively strikes fear into criminals, provides retribution to society, and is clearly a more humane punishment than the death penalty. In life, there are few things that are as infuriating as being punished for something you didn't do, having your money stripped from you, or having time taken away from you. And here in America, the death penalty does all three. Since 1973, 142 death row inmates have been exonerated, meaning that 1 in 10 death row inmates have been falsely convicted. Even worse than that, in that same time, 10 or maybe more cases of assumed wrongful executions have occurred. Although nobody knows the exact number due to the fact that the courts do not entertain these claims post-execution, the loss of one innocent life is too many. This is also according to the Death Penalty Information Center. The abolition of the death penalty would also save America billions of dollars. This at first may seem impossible, but according to an article by the Death Penalty Focus in California, it costs $90,000 a year more to hold an inmate on death row as opposed to holding them in a year on a life without parole sentence. And with that said, at that time 670 inmates were on death row, adding up to $63.3 million a year. Even more startling, the death penalty is estimated to cost the state $9 billion by 2030. And these numbers don't even include the other 31 states that employ the death penalty. Why does this happen, you ask? In order to be sentenced to death, the government requires a long drawn-out trial, which, along with the additional security needed to watch these inmates, the cost can add up very quickly. This means that not only could you see your tax money go to better things such as schools and your roadways, we are also wasting the time of all those involved in the lengthy death penalty process. In the end, here's what you need to know. 32 states in America currently employ the death penalty unethically and arbitrarily. In doing so, these states are employing an inefficient deterrent, costing billions in taxpayer dollars and hindering or taking the lives of innocent men and women, throwing away the time of everyone involved. Fortunately, however, all of this can be fixed with one simple Supreme Court decision to declare the death penalty unconstitutional in accordance with the 8th Amendment. With that said, the issue is not going to fix itself. In order to make a difference yourself, go out and research the death penalty at places like the Death Penalty Information Center's website. Let your congressman know that you do not support the death penalty. Advocate the death penalty's abolition. And first and foremost, go out there and vote for those leaders that do not support the death penalty.